This short video will cover why I decided to use online videos to help my students in civil procedure. The use of online videos in class is often referred to as flipping, or the use of blended, meaning you're using online and traditional learning methods in the same class. I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by the word flipping and why you might consider using this approach in your class. So first, what is flipping your classroom? Well, under the traditional method of education, especially in law school, we assume that students are spending the majority of the time it takes to master the basic concepts in the course on their own at home. The student reads, prepares notes, thinks through basic application of problems, and this is led either by the casebook or notes that you've provided as a professor to the students. And this type of learning is generally very solitary. The student might be engaging with members of their study group, but primarily we expect these students to work with very minimal active assistance from us as they try to digest the law. Then in class, we find under the traditional method that professors focus primarily on delivering substantive content. You clarify any of the students' errors in understanding the law, making sure they have mastery of the basic legal concepts that you need for them to understand to master the course, and then you attempt basic application of the concepts generally to a series of hypotheticals. And so under the traditional approach, what you see then, in summary, is the student trying to engage with the material and digest it, think it through on their own outside of class, and then in class, the professor then lecturing or providing some sort of facilitation of the substantive content in the course. In a flipped classroom, we just switch these roles. So outside of class, the student is now getting more instruction from you. There's now guided course content. Basically, this is the lecture you would have provided in class. If you think about it, it's generally that, even if you don't like to use a lot of lecture, that section of your class where you're trying to make sure that everyone has a good handle on what you're about to talk about that day, sort of the top of the hour points of discussion, you now give them to the students before class in 10 to 15 minute one-take videos that you tape and post online. The students watch these as they read their assignment and work through the material for class. They might answer quizzes that you've posted or an assignment you've posted that they need to complete while they watch the video. The idea being that now, on their own, they're getting more of your guidance while they're preparing for class. The benefit to this, hopefully, is that the course content you would have otherwise had to deliver in class is now already delivered, so that you can spend class time focusing on application of the law and utilizing that content in a more meaningful way. So instead of just getting to basically basic applications of the law, you get into more deeper a discussion of more complicated problems, which might allow you to talk about things like policy or legal skills. It might permit you to have more time in class to bring in guest speakers or to do more group work. The idea behind the flip concept is that the students now have gotten more mastery because they've had your guidance before class, so that when they come into class, they're at a better level and can actually use the class time to do the things that we would have otherwise liked to be able to do with our students, but often find we can't. So why might you want to consider flipping? Well, for me, I decided that this approach would help me because I found that while I often tried to target my class to teaching level to the middle of the class, the average student who needed lecture, what I found was happening was that there were fewer of these students in the class, and that I had more students at the top end who were frankly bored by class. It was providing substantive content that they in fact had mastered on their own, and they would really have rather spent class time doing more advanced exercises, a practical skill development, or even higher level policy debate. But we weren't able to get there because, in addition to losing some of the middle to these higher end students, some of my middle was falling farther behind, and I had a greater group of students who were really finding even the basic lecture to be somewhat challenging. And trying to teach all of these students in the same room was proving to be a very difficult task. So what I liked about using online videos is that it provided differentiation of the material for the student. So the video I provided was the same. It didn't matter whether you were my top performing student who didn't need much additional assistance outside of class, or if you were the student who was weak and falling behind. The fact that it was in a video format and provided to you outside of class allowed for the student to use it in a different manner based upon their need level. So for example, my stronger students would often go through the videos with little effort. It generally made them feel confident that they'd be prepared to be in class, and then they would be able to start class really ready to engage in a more intense problem. For my weaker students and for my average students, it gave them a chance to have more guidance. They were able to stop the video if they were struggling with a concept, rewind it, review it again and again if they needed to. Some students I found were not consistently in one group or another. So for example, I might have a student in the higher performing group with respect to one particular topic in class, but as to another topic in class, they all of a sudden found that they were being challenged in a way they hadn't before. And so for those particular topics, they watched the videos more frequently. And it really allowed them to utilize the information at a pace and at a time that they were able to actually digest information. The students actually performed as a whole much better and expressed greater satisfaction with the course. By about midway through the term, I found that my students were outperforming significantly students in prior years on the same standardized clicker questions I had used in class for several years, which was significant. At least 10 to 15% better on all the questions as we were continuing through the course. And the students told me, both in polls I had given to the students, I surveyed them throughout the course to see whether how this approach was working with them. And from the top learners who were before board in class all the way to the weak students who were struggling with the materials, they all expressed much greater satisfaction with the course because each one was able to get more out of class time, and each one was able to get the type of learning guidance from me as they were preparing to class that they needed. The stronger students didn't need to waste time regurgitating information that they had already known. They'd buzz through my 5-minute video and be done. My weaker students would get the extra help they needed, but then they would all be at the same level to actually participate in class. One student had a great quote that I liked. They said that they felt the class created a culture of working to learn. And what they meant by this was that the students themselves engaged more outside of the class and really worked, made some effort to learn, and that they'd have to decide at their own pace how much time they would spend. I finally found the thing that to be most satisfying for myself and the students was it freed class time for me to do things I'd always wanted to do, including more skills training, something that we're all trying to get into classes these days and are having trouble given the competing goals of bar passage, course coverage, skill exercises, and you name it, trying to fit it into your class. I like this approach because it's very flexible. A teacher who has no interest in doing skills exercise in class might really like to be able to engage in a very intense policy debate. But if you have students who are still struggling with basic concepts, that debate will fall flat. Making sure that they're ready to participate gives you a chance to have a more meaningful debate in class. So what are the challenges? There are some potential challenges to taking this approach to education. The first is that there is a little bit of a learning curve for you and for the students on using the technology. In a subsequent video, I'll describe how I use this screencasting tool that you're seeing now to create online videos. Once you learn it, it's a very, very basic process, but like anything, there's the initial investment in learning the technology. I found the students really didn't have any difficulty with the technology because I posted the videos to YouTube and they'd all had a lot of exposure to that tool. Additionally, there is a learning curve for you and for the students on adjusting to this new approach. In addition to creating videos, you're spending now time doing things in class you otherwise hadn't, so you also have to work on changing some of your class prep. In subsequent videos, I'll talk about some strategies so that this doesn't become overwhelming if you start to decide to flip your class. And lastly, one challenge is you need to ensure that your student are watching videos. Otherwise, if they don't watch the videos, then you don't get the benefit of them getting that extra boost or extra help outside of class. And again, in our subsequent videos, I'll address some strategies to ensure they're watching the videos. So I hope you found this helpful and that you'll find the subsequent videos helpful as well.